Okay. All right, Ryan, you can go ahead and there. So this is I'm referencing an article. It was written by Mark Frankhouse from WKFR, and it speaks to a particularly deeper issue that comes up. It seems like every 6 months or so, we get a puff piece either from like Forbes or M Live or a lot of business magazines talking about how Kalamazoo is such a hip, cool, and cheap place to live. Now, I won't argue with that first part. We've got a lot of we've got a wonderful art scene, live music all over the place. It's one of the reasons that this is like my little Shire hobbit hole. Um, Not to mention, craft beer and all that stuff. However, there is somewhat more of a kind of an insidious dimension to these articles when they pop up and I see them. And kind of similar to what we were just talking about with Mary Balkema, the G word, gentrification. Um, Particularly when you're seeing these articles in like these business dailies, what that ostensibly is trying to do is broadcast or send a signal to kind of upwardly mobile business types, predominantly white male ones. Kalamazoo is hip and cheap. You should come down here. And we've seen, I've seen this happen in action. So, good example. I used to live over on Cedar Street, right down near the end of it, kind of where the Davis, the Hill, East Hall, etc., where many of us made out for the first time. Um, sorry. Um, but At the other end of the street, as many of you know, that luxury high rise was built kind of right down at the corner of Cedar and Rose, and it's fundamentally, is nuts. Like, so compare it to um, the house I was living at the time, which is it was like a 5 bedroom house, about 1,500, maybe it was 1,400 a month. Compare it to some of the studio apartments at the corner of Cedar and Rose, which are upwards of $900 a month. That's like for one like single guy or gal or whatever to have, and it's not any closer in proximity downtown than like a property across the street that probably kind of a similar ballpark as the house I lived in. But what it does is that sends out a further signal to a lot of those upwardly mobile business professionals who don't live in Kalamazoo. Those are moderate to cheap prices, especially like compared to places like Chicago, New York, LA, etc. So when we see these articles being published in these national publications, it's basically ringing the dinner bell for the bourgeoisie to try to stick their proverbial butts in our town. Um, Also, there's other issues that go into this. I'm gonna read a little bit from Mark's article, which is really great, by the way. I recommend y'all check it out. As Kalamazoo doesn't consider itself the coolest low-cost place to live. He published this earlier today, and he touches on a couple of like long-standing systemic issues that these articles tend to ignore or write off. Very intentional reason. Um, he cites what we were just talking about with the Mary Balkema issue, and I want to read directly from this. Many people feel that not only is this poll wrong, it's based on like a poll of cities, but it's bigger than just a city as Kalamazoo, as one pointed out on a Facebook post. As long as rent is over $350 per month, there is no low cost of living in America. Cost of electricity, natural gas, city water and sewer, trash, communication, those high costs of utilities average over $400 per month. Then cost of transportation, having a vehicle, insurance, mileage, maintenance, and repair, that's another 400. So, if you're in the working class, you're getting squeezed. And something I should mention too, when we're talking about the cost of living in Kalamazoo, it correlates. It's not just like, oh, everything's cheap here. For the working class of Kalamazoo, we also have lower wages on average than much of the rest of the country. So it correlates. It's not like we get a bunch of extra spending money because of this. It just means we make less money, and because of that, the cost of living is a little bit lower to keep track of that. But that gap has been expanding, and especially when gentrification brings in people of a higher economic class, that can drive up prices for all of us who are still making those lower than average wages. Mark goes on to write, this poll ignores the low-income areas that have a high crime rate, considering the poor conditions of neighborhood and living, all while the city announces they want to build a new stadium in downtown Kalamazoo, something we clearly don't need at this point in time. I think what makes a place truly cool is somewhere where all residents are valued and looked after, and the welfare of all communities within that city holds precedence over entertainment wants. A place where everyone is protected and can comfortably enjoy all the fun things a city has to offer. And goes on to say, there are many cool events that take place. There are many cool stores and shops that are unique, which need our support. There are tons of great people in a community that is begging for serious change and help. But it seems just because you have all that doesn't necessarily mean you can pretend to know what it's like living here by just looking at the quaint shops and events. From the controversial handling of the peaceful BLM demonstrations in 2020 to the collective mindset of those working and living in the city, they clearly don't consider it low cost. The people of Kalamazoo, who have been crucial members of this community and have watched it change, are very vocal about their unpleasantries regarding the state of the city. I think Kalamazoo is a really cool city, but the people have made it clear we have a lot of work to do if we really want to be the coolest. So again, I really appreciate Mark writing this article, and also kudos to WKFR for publishing it. I don't see a lot of this kind of more in-depth criticism of local politics from their page. So it is something very, very nice to see. So again, big kudos and shout out to both Mark and WKFR for this really important article that I think it's a good polemic against, again, these ubiquitous articles we see almost like twice a year about how Kalamazoo is just a hip, nice place for upwardly mobile businessmen to colonize, basically. All right. So again, I'm going to link to the article in the show notes. Please check it out. It's wonderfully written, good stuff.